Hi everybody and welcome to our Lunch and Learn, monthly Lunch and Learn. Very exciting today because today it's being hosted by our Women in Franchising, and there's a few of us in the room today, and I'm sure we can see there's a few of you out there. So if you'd just like to jump in the chat now and say hello to everybody, just say hello and where you're from, or some positive thought for the day. That would be great. So a little bit of housekeeping regarding the chat. If you, during this course of today, want to ask a question, then number one, feel free. Take yourself off mute, ask the question. The group's, small enough for us to be able to do that, and I'm sure Vanessa would welcome any questions you have along the way. Otherwise, please type in the chat your question, and Lisa will then quickly, yell out that there's a question in here, and we can go from there. Otherwise, we do have about 10 minutes left at the end for Q&A and a bit of a chat. But today we're really excited because we've got Vanessa Wilmot here. Vanessa's the Operations Director for GeoTech, and she runs our Women in Franchising program, which has been going on for lots and lots of years. I'm sure you all know that. So today, really, we're talking about the challenges that are faced by franchisers post-COVID and also in the current environment. But no further ado, we have Vanessa.
Thanks very much, Helen. Firstly, I'd like to say thanks to the FCA for the opportunity today to take you all through the challenges faced by franchisers post-COVID and also in the current environment. Obviously, we've only got half an hour. There's a lot going on out there in the current environment at the moment, but what we thought we would do is touch on some of the most pressing things or the different things that we've come across at GeoTech and also in Women in Franchising. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Vanessa Wilmot. I'm the Operations Director at GeoTech Information Services. So GeoTech is a data analytics and consulting company using data mapping and analysis to help our clients with network planning and their growth strategies. As Helen mentioned, I'm also the chairperson and on the committee for Women in Franchising in Australia. So today we're going to have a look at and talk about some of the changes and challenges that occurred as a result of COVID and what that means in the current environment, and also how that is specifically impacting on women in franchising. We've also got some really exciting upcoming Women in Franchising events, so you have to wait to the end to find out more about those. So we've got some very exciting news there. Okay, so we'll get into it. So it's really important for franchisers to reflect back on what has happened over the last few years. There's been a lot of challenges and a lot of change. So a great starting point is to look back into what has happened as a result of COVID. I know it's a time that we probably would all prefer to forget, especially us here in Melbourne. But it's really important to understand what resulted or what happened as a result of COVID, because a lot of that is playing out or makes sense in today's environment for where we are at today. So I guess when COVID first hit, there was a really general need of consumers to feel safe. So this was largely driven by lockdowns and restrictions and the pandemic itself. So no one really knew what was going to happen, how serious it was, and that sort of thing. So what happened was, what it meant in terms of key target markets is, what it meant was for a lot of consumers, they wanted to only frequent brands that they knew and trusted. So during those really difficult or uncertain times, they were going to the brands that they knew and trusted. So what it meant was some consumers had even stronger affiliations with the brands that they were already using. So this actually led to increased brand loyalty, and actually that some brands, their key target market became even stronger. So if their key target market before COVID was families, that became even stronger if they were sort of tapping into and they were a new and trusted brand. For other consumers, it meant being more selective with their spend. It was a really uncertain time. A lot of people had restricted income streams. People were stood down. It was a very, very uncertain time. So there was also many consumers that were a lot more selective with their spend. and we're only frequenting a very select types of outlets or stores and that type of thing as well. So what this has led to, and this has been playing out over the last couple of years, it's led to some brands having a fundamental shift or change in their key target market. So the result of the challenges or changes as a result of COVID-19 really can be summarised as changes in consumer shopping habits and consumer movements as well. So we've been doing at GeoTech, we've been doing a lot of work with our clients, not only as a result of COVID-19, but in general, helping them understand who their key target market is. And it's critical to understand, has that key target market changed as a result of the changes that happened to do with COVID? Or is the key target market the same? And if there has been a change, what action needs to be taken? So this can then flow through to marketing, the types of products and services offered, to selecting the right types of sites as well. Supporting local. So we really saw this concept during the COVID period and also after the COVID period of affiliations with local. So what we found was brands in more local environments experienced the greatest benefits to sales or the least losses when they were able to tap into local communities. So think of your local fitness, your local gym, your local cafe. They were the types of environments, if they were able to tap into those local communities, that experienced the greatest benefits to sales. People were at home a lot more and were going to more of those local environments. So this has actually stayed somewhat, particularly with a lot of companies are still doing the work from home hybrid models of working and that sort of thing. So this whole idea of supporting, your local cafe, your local restaurant, your local fitness club, and so forth. The other change that happened was those brands or those offerings in more mass retail-oriented environments, for example, large centres, they were actually the most negatively impacted proportionally during the pandemic. So think of like your Chadstones and your Bondi Junctions. So during this period, they were really the most negatively impacted proportionally. A couple of reasons for that was more touch points. So people, were trying to limit their touch points. And the other reason, obviously, was at different points in time, a lot of shops were potentially shut down as well. So they did bounce back quicker after sort of all the restrictions were lifted and that sort of thing. But they were impacted, and it has changed the dynamics of the consumer with still being affiliated a lot more with local brands as well. It was an exponential rise in technology. So for a lot of, for everybody really, so franchisors, franchisees, consumers, everybody. So we saw this exponential rise in technology as well. So obviously from the need for things like online meetings to conducting training, through to even offering services online to consumers as well. So that went even through to things like, fitness centres were doing fitness programs online, tutoring online for children and adults, and that sort of thing as well. So with this exponential rise in technology, all brands really had to adapt to this because a lot of that has carried through to today. We are using technology more than we ever have before. We do a lot of work at GeoTech in the home improvement and the food industry space, and some really interesting trends happened in those two industries in particular. So what we saw was growth in online purchasing and delivery was exponential and nothing like we had ever seen before at GeoTech, and nothing like the franchise systems that we work with had seen before in those segments as well. It was really a bit all over the place. So some brands did and some industries did really well during this period, whereas others really suffered. So the home improvement and food industry segments in particular, some of them had even something like 10 years worth of growth in just 1 year in online purchasing and delivery. But it's important to keep in mind that for a lot of brands, this was also at the expense of in-person sales or in-store sales. So it was still a very challenging and uncertain time. And there's also been a lot of questions around whether the trends would continue. So what we found was that, and that's a challenge in itself. So it's trying to navigate the in-store versus online versus delivery, all the different channels that different franchise systems use today. And there's a lot of questions around whether that would continue. And it's different by industry and by brand, but we have found that for a lot of brands, it has those trends have continued, but the trends have slowed. So online and delivery growth has slowed in recent times. It is still growing, but it's slowed. But the important point here is that online and delivery are very significant parts of most franchise systems networks. It's also important to understand the types of consumers that are using the different channels. With these trends towards online and delivery, some people think that it's a totally different consumer using it, and that is true for some brands, but for other brands, it actually is the same consumer that is using the multi-channels that different franchise systems offer. It's really interesting thinking back. So in the past, traditionally, online and delivery customers, they were more your tech-savvy, moderate to moderate high socioeconomic young adults. So even before COVID, that was the largest segment in the market that were doing online purchasing and ordering delivery and that sort of thing. So they are the type of consumer that are on their devices a lot, more tech savvy, and so they have always been the biggest segment. However, a bit of a fun fact, did you know that the greatest increases in online and delivery purchasing at an overall level during the pandemic was actually by families and by consumers located in outer suburban areas? So, that's a blanket observation in the segment that grew the most, obviously by brand, by industry, by, it could be different, but at an overall level, it meant that families and people in those more outer suburban areas, the uptake was bigger in terms of online and delivery. So it's really important to understand whether your online channel is tapping into a different consumer or not to your in-store or in-person channel as well. So are the channels mutually exclusive? So are they tapping into a different type of person? So then therefore they need to be marketed and communicated to differently, or are they tapping into the same consumer? So we have had some franchise clients that were really surprised when analysis was undertaken, and their online customer was actually exactly the same person as their in-store customer. And that's really important to consider for planning too, because what it means is that cross-channel cannibalization needs to be factored in. So what that means is if it's tapping into the same type of consumer, that same person on any given day might be using different, all the different channels. So it's not necessarily a different type of person. So, so we've been assisting our brands, or a lot of franchise brands, understand more around who their current key target market is and any changes that have occurred over time. So whether that be changes because of COVID or changes because of a shift in the market, a shift in your offering, it's really important to keep on top of that. And also the types of consumers that are purchasing via different channels, so in-person versus online versus delivery as well. So it's really important to look at that too. Once your key target market has been identified by channel, it can also then be determined where they're located in high concentration. So one way of doing this is looking at mapping out, where there's high to low proportions of your key target market. So the map that's just come up is on-site versus in-store, and this is a real example from the past that we've had with a particular client. So the areas that are brighter in red, there are stronger concentrations of this brand's key target market. So you can see that this brand is attracting in-store mostly outer suburban family types of people, and they do best in outer suburban family types of areas. So the story changes a little bit when you then map out this particular client's online or delivery customers. So the areas, the brighter the blue or the teal that's come through, the stronger the concentration of where their online or delivery key target market are located. So For this particular client, there was some overlaps. So in the young adult or family areas of like Pakenham and out west in the Tarneit sort of area. However, the strongest proportions of their online and delivery were actually in the Melbourne CBD and inner urban areas. So it's really important to understand the similarities and the differences so that then can be used for things like product offerings, marketing, and also even looking at things like where you're going to put new sites to tap into either online or in-store types of customers and overlay that with competition as well. Another big question that we get a lot is in terms of CBD. So where to for CBD sites following COVID? So as everyone's well aware, the CBDs were one of the hardest hit retail precincts when COVID happened. So in today's terms, with continued work from home or hybrid models of working, a lot of brands have seen less or more limited growth in CBD environments over the last couple of years, and in particular in the more commercial or employment areas of the CBD. So what's happening is during the week, when workers used to be there all day, 5 days a week, now a lot of people are only picking and choosing. They might only be there once a week. They might be there once a fortnight, a few times a week. So there's now people coming in less and less regularly as well, and that is here to stay to a certain degree as well. So it's really important to understand the dynamics of CBD or inner urban environments and where the activity is occurring today as well, and the right type of activity for your brand or identified key target market. And the CBD is actually quite an extreme case because there are pockets within the main CBDs in Australia that are very employment and commercial orientated, and then there are pockets that are more sort of entertainment, dining orientated or retail orientated as well. So it's about really looking at, where in the CBD if you are considering that. So an example's just popped up on the screen. So this is the Melbourne CBD, and what this shows is where there are high to low levels of activity occurring at a street block level across the Melbourne CBD. So the brighter the purple, the stronger the levels of activity that are occurring, and through down to red is where there's very limited or much less activity occurring. Yellow is yellow-orange is sort of getting medium to medium-low levels of activity. So this is based on MasterCard transaction activity data. So that's where actually transactions are occurring or where spend is occurring in the different precincts within the CBD, and also mobile device data as well, which is actually people moving around the CBD. So that's this particular map is actually combining those two. You can then also look at this in terms of where the consumers are located throughout the CBD at any given point in time. And this is the type of thing that can be done for any retail precinct, but the CBD is a really interesting example because, as you can see from this, the brighter the areas of red on the map that's just come up on the right, the stronger the levels of mobile device activity. So the more activity that is happening in those areas. And it also looks at things like consumer movements and travel patterns around the CBD as well. This is really interesting too, because what you can do is look at this by time of day skews and days of the week. So for example, if you have a coffee offer, you might want to be located in retail precincts or, for example, in the CBD on, the main pedestrian pathways from the main train stations to where the employment is, so people can pick up their coffee on the way to work. So you want to be looking for areas that have, a lot of morning activity. On the other hand, if you're a dining or an entertainment offer, you might want to look at the areas of the CBD that are busier on the weekends or in the evening and have cluster partners that are more conducive to nighttime activity. So not all areas are equal in the CBD or elsewhere as well. So it's really understanding, where the activity is that's right for your brand. So that's just a very brief sort of snapshot on some of the questions or the challenges or the changes that have arisen as a result of COVID. So on top of that, how that's then impacted or played out in today's environment. So one of the biggest challenges that we hear, not only in the women in franchising community, but also at GeoTech, is the current cost of living pressures. So following the pandemic, and this has played out since the pandemic as well, so some households had increased savings, especially the types of areas where, people were locked down for long periods. So what happened is when all the restrictions were lifted, people weren't going out as much during the pandemic or couldn't go out as much. It actually resulted in increased spend. And in particular, we saw this for a lot of franchise brands located in Melbourne. Again, I know we're using Melbourne as an example, but Melbourne was one of the most locked down places in the world, even though we prefer to forget that. So what actually happened was there was a bit of a spending frenzy, particularly in Melbourne, due to those pent up savings that occurred following the pandemic. And people do use the term sometimes grunge spending, or they, went out and bought themselves a treat. So there's a lot of stories about people who, were very unhappy about being locked down. So to reward themselves, they went out and bought a Gucci handbag as soon as they could get out. It was actually a funny story. My sister-in-law went to Chadstone before she came to see us, and we live around the corner from Chadstone, and did just that. So it was actually, it actually was quite real. With interest rate rises, increased costs of goods and services, low consumer confidence, this is all having an impact today on franchise brands and has been building up over time. So consumer confidence, based on the ANZ Roy Morgan measure of consumer confidence, as of currently, it's at about 77, when the midpoint is 100. Anything below 100 is low. Anything above 100 is high. So 77 is very low. And a lot of consumers have concerns at the moment, not only about their own personal finances, but also about the outlook for the Australian economy. So this is playing out for, and I bet everyone sitting at home is thinking about that, the bills coming in, the electricity is going up, insurance going up. The cost of living has really gone up a lot. So what we have found in looking at a lot of different franchise brands, the ones that are tending to be struggling the most, or the types of sites that are struggling the most, are in your more lower socioeconomic and outer suburban mortgage bout areas in particular are really impacted at the moment. So what we're seeing is it is those areas that have a lot of millennials, have a lot of young adults or young families, usually with a mortgage. Their income streams, are fairly low. So they're the ones that are really feeling it at the moment in the outer suburban areas. So all of these changes that we've mentioned so far, so the changes in consumer shopping habits and movements, people working from home more than they ever have before, even though that has shifted to more of a hybrid model, the concept of shopping local, all of these things combined with the cost of living pressures has actually had some really inconsistent changes for a lot of franchise brands. So this is a really interesting example, and this is a real example. So there's a particular client, and we looked at their sales currently for all the stores in the network at a very high level. If you looked at their sales now versus a year or two ago, their network change in sales is plus 1%. So that basically means at an overall network level, they've gone up 1%. Not setting the world alight, but for them, in this current economic environment, they thought that's okay. However, it's a very, very different story when we looked at it on a per store basis. So as I mentioned before, this is a real example, and this is just a cut down version. But basically what this chart shows is each one of their bars is one of their stores. So the orange bars and it's the magnitude of the change in sales. So the orange bars, store A, store B, store C, and store D, they have all gone down over 20% in the last year or two when you look at their sales performance. On the right, stores E, F, G, and H, they have all gone up 20% or more. Store H went up 40% compared to a year or two ago. So as you can see, this creates, a little bit of an issue when you're looking at this, because what this actually means is there's been some sort of fundamental shift to what is happening with this client to have this such diverse growth or decline in sales. So it's really important to understand what is happening, and every brand is different and the reasons will be different for each brand. But some of this is the different things that are playing out, the shifts in key target markets, the shifts because of the cost of living pressures. So some of the stores might have been located in really in areas with really limited disposable income, so they're not spending as much. So they're the ones that have had the declines and so forth. Now, the international conflict. So this is something, obviously this is very, very sensitive, and it's not something that's probably being talked about all that much. But the international conflicts and the protests that are occurring are actually having a really significant impact for some brands. But these impacts are not consistent. So for some brands, they have sites that are not impacted at all, and they have sites that are growing in sales. Whereas for other sites, some brands have had their sites negatively impacted by 30% plus. And it's usually been more American-based brands or have American link, and also brands that are in very ethnically diverse areas that have been impacted the most. So that combined with the cost of living pressures and changes in key target markets is actually leading to a lot of inconsistent performance in franchise, in a lot of franchise networks, like that chart that you saw on the page before. And this is not unusual either. So it's not, this obviously isn't happening for everyone, but for some brands, it has been very, very negative and very, very inconsistent as well. So it's really important to understand what is happening at a brand and also at a site level, so appropriate action can be taken, because every brand's different and will have its own unique set of challenges. And I think that's the important point. So some of these challenges will affect you, some won't. But at the end of the day, I guess it's about understanding what is happening with your brand. So in summary, with all the changes that have occurred, some important consideration for franchise networks to consider in today's environment are: has your key target market stayed or changed, stayed the same or changed? How are consumers interacting with your brand across different channels? Has your brand's performance changed in different retail environments, and should a different strategy be adopted moving forward? This is strip locations versus centre locations versus a CBD. Should CBD environments be considered, and where in the CBD is best for your offer or brand? Have the current cost of living pressures and other localised issues, such as international conflicts, impacted on your brand's performance, and has the impact been consistent or not? So all of these points and challenges mentioned, they do impact on everyone to a varying degree, but there are some additional common challenges that we hear from the women in franchising community as well that we wanted to touch on. So probably the biggest one that still comes up today, and I think it's always been there, but I think we're starting to talk about these things more and more over the last few years. So there's this whole challenges associated with the blurring of boundaries between work and home life. So with hybrid models of working, while this has its benefits, it also for a lot of people still presents challenges. Some people still find the juggle really difficult. Some people still find it difficult to switch off, particularly when working from home and you're going from the dining table to cooking the dinner, and setting of boundaries as well. So your availability for work, and with technology now too, switching off at the end of the day, or are you still meant to be available past a certain time? So these kinds of things can have a very real impact on things like workplace wellness, mental health, and in extreme cases, burnout. So that whole concept, which I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar today can relate to, trying to be everything to everyone. Something that we find too within the women in franchising community is that a lot of women in particular do downplay their successes and, do not celebrate their successes or share their stories. So something that we're really big on as part of the women in franchising community is really trying to share the success stories of women in franchising to empower, to inspire others, And so with that, we run a number of events with the FCA to cover some of these challenges that are specific to women in franchising and to share the stories, success stories of women in business and women in franchising as well. So we've got a number of upcoming women in franchising events. So I'm glad you've stayed through to the end so you can hear about these exciting events which are open for booking. And just a note on that, everybody is welcome. So we sometimes get the question, are they only for women? So no, they are for the women in franchising community. So anyone is welcome to come. So the first one coming up is in Brisbane on Friday, the 12th of July from 3 till 4:30. It's for an afternoon tea. The topic is from athlete to entrepreneur, women trailblazers and strategies for burnout prevention in women leaders. So we have Australian Olympians, 2 Australian Olympians. So it's going to be a really exciting event. Bridget Louise Starr and Brooke Hansen. So book your ticket now because we do close bookings, I think, a week or 2 before the event. So make sure you get in www.franchise.org.au/events. So it's on the FCA website. So click through and register for that. Then we have in Melbourne on Thursday, the 8th of July from 7:30 to 9:30. We've got a Women in Franchising breakfast, empowerment in the workplace, today's leaders and leaders of the future. So I'll be the facilitator for that morning. We've got Diana Williams, CEO and founder of Fernwood Fitness. She'll be sharing her story, followed by a panel discussion including Diana, Kate Hockley, franchising manager at Schnitz, and Jenny Boymill, client engagement partner at the Proven Group. Will be part of a panel discussion on empowerment in the workplace. Also, $5 from every ticket sold will be donated to Rise Up Australia. So Rise Up Australia supports women and children fleeing domestic and family violence situations. So a really, really important cause. So again, book your ticket for that now. And lastly, we have an event coming up in Sydney on Friday, the 9th of August. And that will be for an afternoon tea from 2 till 4. And the topic is Learn From Me. And we've got some really great speakers, so renowned speakers sharing their invaluable insights and experiences. Rasha Aboud, the partner from Bay Bridge Lawyers, she'll be facilitating that session. And the speakers will include Therese Frangi, CEO of Mad Mex, April Harwood, Chief Sales Officer at Jack's Tyres and Auto, and Emily Lucas, Senior Associate at HWL Ebsworth Lawyers. So all of these can be booked under the www.franchise.org.au events. So that was it. So I'm not sure if there's any questions that have come through.
Well, I've certainly got to say that was the most streamlined and organised presentation yet. And I had some questions, but then it sort of rolled into the women in franchising. So I've got to think about the question that I had. But who else has got a question out there? With some very interesting stats and information. Actually, you know, I've got a question for all of you out there as well. For example, where it showed the demographic or the type of customer in store compared to the type of customer online. I found that quite interesting. Like, has anyone got an example where that happens in your business? Have you got 2 different customers, or have you got the same? Would you like to share? Don't be shy.
I guess the important point on that is every brand is different. So some people will actually have the same and some will be very, very different. But it's how you're incorporating that into your strategies as well.
Anyone got an example of what they have found?
It's very quiet.
Do I have to ask a question? No, do I pick someone? I mean,
pick a volunteer.
Claire Wilson, you're smiling. How does the alternative board?
So I actually was sort of formulating a question because this presentation was very relevant for the retail space. We're not in retail. We're B2B, but and so I wondered how you felt these trends would be impacting the B2B market rather than the retail market.
Okay, that's a great question. So I do a lot of work in the B2B space as well as the B2C. So I guess in terms of the B2B, it's about translating that through to where the working populations are currently at in terms of, you know, especially the CBD versus the outer suburban area. So we have seen a lot of trends in B2B, again, more away from the CBD and in the outer suburban, more local areas. And there is a lot of different data sets and data sources that can help B2B as well. So even those heat maps that I showed earlier that Helen mentioned, showing the differences in the different customers, that could very easily have been where there's highest to lowest concentrations of other businesses, but not only business activity in total, but types of businesses. So for example, if someone's offer was more for white collar businesses or corporates, then that, you know, you can have a look at where there's high to low concentrations of those other types of businesses, or if your business was more for tradies and that sort of thing as well. So the same sorts of challenges and the same types of applications can flow across to B2B, I guess, with just different underlying data sets.
Right.
Any other questions from anyone? Emily, Lucas, Jenny. Nothing in the chat.
No, nothing in the chat.
Can I ask you,
Jenny.
Vanessa?
Go ahead, Jen.
Can you just talk a little bit about the regional areas in relation to, you know, cities? I think, you know, for many businesses, they have quite different strategies around that. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So regional is actually a question that does come up a lot, the regional versus metropolitan. And we have found that depending on who a brand's key target market is, some brands are very successful in regional markets and actually even more successful. So that's for B2C as well as even B2B, because it's about, with regional, it's actually about looking at things like the population level, so the bigger versus smaller regional towns, but also which regional towns are more prosperous, and that's usually the towns that have got more activity, more income coming through, quite often where there's universities and that sort of thing to bring people in. So I think a lot of it does depend on who the key target market is as well. So for a lot of brands, if their key target market is more your moderate socioeconomic Australians or blue collar Australians, which is more like your tradies and labourers, or their B2B offer is orientated towards more blue collar, then what we do find is regional strategies can be very, very successful for those brands. Whereas brands that have more of a higher socioeconomic skew, maybe more of a white collar skew or more of an ethnically diverse skew, regional may not be as great an option for them. So it really does depend on the brand and the product offer. But for some clients that we work with, regional actually does better than their metro. For others, it's the complete opposite, where regional would be a no-go sort of zone for them.
Who else is on here today? Bev Taylor from InExpress.
Hey there, just taking myself off mute. Yeah, no input. To be honest, it's just nice to kind of listen to people's points of views and get an insight. So yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks, Bev. Thanks, you.
Bev.
Well, it was very informative, I must say. You sort of probably answered lots of our questions. What have we got?
People are saying ditto to that.
Everyone's in agreement. So we're all in agreement that Vanessa pretty much answered all our questions.
But make sure, yeah, you and with the women in franchising too, make sure that you do register over the next sort of week or two if you are looking at going to these events. I think they're shaping up to be fantastic events. So I'm hoping to see you all at the events as well in Brisbane, Melbourne and Sydney. So that would be really great to see you guys there too.
Fantastic. Well, on that note, I guess it's the conclusion of yet another Lunch and Learn. And next month, which is on Wednesday, the 3rd of July, not that far away, we have Afterpay hosting our next Lunch and Learn. And they are going to be talking even more specific, but consumer behaviours and trends. And of course, Afterpay has all the data in the world for that one. So can't wait to hear exactly what is going on out there and how it's going to help us in the business, target the demographics or, the type of customers that we're looking for. So thank you very much, everyone. And see you all on Wednesday, 3rd of July.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.